Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome again to our weekly conversation around emergency preparedness for hospice and home health providers throughout Mississippi and Louisiana. Today, we will be looking at the medically needed sheltering that takes place in Mississippi. We welcome you on this, the last day before we enter the peak of hurricane season. I want to remind our members and our visitors in Mississippi that we did talk about hospice and home health services in an emergency on the Mississippi Gulf Coast back in the end of June, and you can click on this hyperlink, and it will take you to that recording of that session. In fact, we have been recording a lot of our sessions, and this is our calendar for the remainder of the hurricane season. What's in blue is all hyperlinked to our YouTube channel so that you can see those specific regions and the discussion around them. I want to remind everyone that next week we will be looking at Louisiana Region 3, which covers like Metro, Houma, Thibodaux, Southeast Louisiana, Bayou Country. Just to remind everyone, the prediction on May 1st was that there were going to be 23 named storms, that this was going to be a rather active season. 5 major hurricanes. The only major hurricane that we've seen thus far was Beryl back in June. We haven't had a whole lot of activity outside of that. However, it does look like the coast off the coast of Africa is getting a little bit more organized, and there are a couple of disturbances that we are beginning to watch as we approach the peak of hurricane season, which was going to come around the second week of August through the second week of September. The prediction at the beginning of the hurricane season is that there was a 23% chance that Louisiana would see a major hit, that 13% chance that Mississippi would see a major hit. There was an 81% probability in that prediction on May 1st that most of this activity would be taking place in the Atlantic and on the eastern seaboard as opposed to the Gulf of Mexico. We'll see if that bears out. There is a system that's moving its way north towards us now. If it moves fast, they're saying it's going to go into the Atlantic. If it moves slow, there's a better likelihood that it's going to end up in the Gulf. Our mantra as home care and hospice providers is that by law, you have to have an emergency plan for your agency, and that emergency plan has to be shared with your local emergency manager. We suggest that you extend that to include all of the parishes, all of the counties within your service area, and that you share your plan with all of those parishes, county emergency managers, not just your local one. We also advise everyone that you need to meet with your emergency manager, and again, meet with the emergency managers within your service area, because while emergency preparedness we try to get a unified approach. Every parish, every county, every region, every district does it a little bit differently. And you need to know what the plans for your county, your parish, your region, your district are in order to make sure that your emergency plan is complete. Are you using the at-risk registry? It's a great tool for notifying emergency managers of those patients that are on your service that would need assistance in the event of an evacuation. This is only about evacuation and those patients who cannot evacuate themselves, and getting that information to the emergency manager. We'll be talking about that more later on. Is someone in your office receiving the reminder each week to do the update? If you're using the at-risk registry, it is required that you do a weekly update. If you do not complete the update properly, or if you don't do it, then your patients are not on the list that goes out every Friday morning to your emergency managers. Um, when you're talking with your emergency manager, make sure to find out if there are any credentials that you and your agency will need to re-enter after the disaster, after the storm passes through. Usually, um, you know, um, areas that are affected by the storm, there's a lockdown, there's a curfew. Um, there are um, there are certain requirements that some parishes, some counties, some districts, some regions require in terms of you re-entering. And you need to know what that is for your agency ahead of a disaster. If you need placards, you need to download those placards now. And of course, if there is an evacuation, a mass evacuation of the coastal regions of Louisiana and Mississippi, those patients are probably going to be going north. And the question is, do you have contracts in place today with either your branch in a larger corporation or with another small hospice or home health agency where your patients are going to be relocating to for a hurricane, that there's a continuity of care for your patients. You need to ensure that that continuity of care is actually being followed. That's your responsibility as a CMS provider. Hurricane Ida, I want to remind everyone, Hurricane Ida, these storms, these weather systems are not systems that appear Monday through Friday between 8 and 5. When you're planning your emergency, when you're filling out your emergency plan, make sure that you're looking at weekend and holiday landfalls, weekend and holiday disasters. Disaster doesn't happen 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. Usually it comes at the most inopportune times. In the case of Ida, it was during Labor Day weekend. So, have you done a tabletop with your staff to prepare them for different emergency scenarios? What lessons have you learned in past declarations? Do you have current contact information for all of your staff and all of your patients? Do you know what your staff's plans are in terms of evacuation? Do you know what your patients' plans are in terms of evacuation? Do you know what your parish or your county's emergency manager, do you know what their plan is for an evacuation of your patients? And finally, do you have an alternative way of communicating with staff and patients when the landlines and the cell towers go down in an emergency? All of these things ought to be taken into account when you're doing what's called a tabletop exercise with your staff. And if you don't, or if you're not familiar with the tabletop exercises, you can go to these recordings that we have available that explain what a tabletop is, and the second one that actually runs through an actual tabletop with you. Any questions? If anyone has any questions along anything I'm saying, please don't hesitate to either stop me, unmute yourself, or put something in the chat box, and we'll stop and address your question at that time. We're going to be focused today on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, especially with regards to medically needed sheltering of patients. And in the process, those of you in Mississippi, you need this sort of information included in your emergency plan. These are the main contacts for each of the districts. Mississippi has districts as opposed to Louisiana Louisiana's region. Both of them have 9 segments, either 9 regions or 9 districts, but the leadership is for the emergency planners for each district is listed here. These are the contacts for nurses throughout those 9 districts. And then these are the coordinators. This is important information for those of you within each of your districts in Mississippi to have included in your emergency plan. And know who these folks are, because in an emergency, these are the folks that you will be dealing with regards to patient care. And that's why I encourage providers to go to your regional or your district healthcare coalition meetings. Meet these folks so that you know who they are and they know who you are. When in an emergency, relationships count, and you knowing who these folks are is going to be vital for you getting the services that you need for your patients at any given time. These are the District 9 has 6 counties. We went over this. This is the contact information for each one of those counties, the emergency manager and planner. The emergency planner, I should say. Not the emergency manager. These are the your emergency managers in those six districts. So these are your MSDH contacts on the coast, and these are the emergency managers themselves. Again, I highly urge you to make contact with these folks before there's an emergency. These are the alert systems that are available in those 6 counties along the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And this, we now move to the Watchpoint at-risk registry. This is a system required in Louisiana and highly encouraged in Mississippi. It gives home health and hospices the opportunity to quickly identify and flag those particular patients who would have issues if there was an evacuation order called for their neighborhood. It keeps your emergency managers aware of who and where those patients are. This registry is not for nursing home patients, nursing home and hospital patients. They have a separate registry and they have a separate plan from home health and hospice. This is only for those patients who are on home health or hospice, who would meet one of these 4 criteria. Either they're living alone without a caregiver and unable to evacuate themselves, or they do have a caregiver, but the caregiver is either mentally or physically incapable of carrying through an evacuation order, or they don't have the financial means to evacuate. An average evacuation, it's estimated before the pandemic to cost around $750. I'm sure that's well over $1,000 post-pandemic, and we have a lot of patients out there who simply can't afford that. They don't have that extra cash. If emergency managers are aware of the financial needs of a family, emergency managers have vouchers, they have gas cards, they have a lot of resources that they can provide to those particular patients in order to help them get themselves out of danger in an emergency. And finally, the 4th reason for putting them in there is that they're simply refusing to evacuate. You know, we have those folks in every one of our patient populations. They're simply refusing to evacuate. Even if they're refusing to evacuate, you can put them into this registry, but like the other 3, they have to give their consent. This is the consent form for the registry. We have it in a Word format so that you can take that template and make it part of your own part of your own filing system. You can incorporate it into your um, um, enrollment processes. Again, there's a consent form that's important that the patient has to agree to, but there's also an evaluation form, and that's when you find a patient meeting one of the four criteria there, you complete this one-page document gathering that sort of information, and that's the information that is used to put into the registry. It's very simple. It's very direct. Every Thursday morning at 7 a.m., we send out a notice to all of the users of the at-risk registry, reminding them that they have to complete the update before the close of business on Thursday, because on Friday morning at 7 a.m., all of those reports go out to every emergency manager across Mississippi and across Louisiana. So if you don't complete the update, your patient's information remains in the registry. It is just not transmitted to the appropriate emergency manager. It requires hospices and home health agencies to actively say, yes, this patient is still alive this week and still in need of services if there's an evacuation order called between now and next Friday. We send out over 1,000 reminders each week to do the update. Last week, you see the numbers rising as we approach the peak of hurricane season. 230 folks opened those emails, but still we had 847 that did not. If you want to receive a reminder, a weekly reminder about this, please, first of all, go and check in your inbox and make sure that you didn't get in, you're not already on our list. We have 847 people that we're sending this reminder to that simply didn't open the email last week. If you don't see it in your inbox, go and look at your junk file and make sure it didn't land there. If it's not there, give me a call. We'll look and see if we are sending it. It may be that you need to go to your IT people and ask them to allow us to be on the good list, a white list, a good list, something that allows our email to get through the firewalls that your corporate IT people have set up to protect your network. It's very easy for them to lift that firewall for us, but they have to know about us. So if you're not receiving the announcement and you want to, please send me a notice. You can just drop me an email asking to be put on that list. I will check to see if you're on the list already. If you are, I'll write back and let you know you're on the list. Check your junk mail or go to IT in order for us to get through. Any questions? Okay. As of last Friday, we're making some progress actually. We currently have about 1,400, a little over 1,400 hospice patients in the registry, and over 1,000 are identified as needing assistance. However, we still have 38 hospices that did not update 405 patients last week. And so we need them to get on board with this. We have another 1,000 home health patients in the system, and 637 were identified as needing assistance, but we have 39 home health agencies that did not update 366 patients last week, at least last week, some even longer than that. So here's where we start naming names, and I need you to be very cognizant and look at this list. We put them in alphabetical order to make it a little bit easier, but these are the 38 hospices that did not update 405 patients last week. The ones that are highlighted in yellow, those are the Mississippi providers. The others, everybody else is a Louisiana provider. And we want to encourage more Mississippi providers to use the system. But these are the hospices that I'm most worried about in terms of their patients not being on this list. Oh, I see another one. This is Notre Dame in Mississippi is also on this list right here, and they should be highlighted in yellow. I missed that. Sorry about that. Okay, any questions from any hospice that if you see yourself, Rhonda says, I update weekly and have been for years, yet it is still showing our company. I will email you. Thank you, Rhonda, and please do so. And we're going to get to the bottom and see why you're on minority list. I apologize, but all I do is I go to the system and I ask for a report, and it gives me a report. So let's see what's going on. You may have a secondary account in here that has some old patients, and who knows. So we'll see exactly what's going on and get that fixed. But thank you for taking note of that. Now, in terms of home health, there are 40 home health agencies. I was only able to identify one that was in Mississippi that has 366 patients that were not updated last week. Again, if you see your name on this list, please contact me if you think that you're doing the update correctly, or you don't know why your name's on this list. Get in contact with me and let's track it down so that we can get these patients the type of coverage that they actually need. Again, it's 366 home health patients and 405 hospice patients that were not included in last week's reports because they were not updated at least last week. And some of them haven't been updated since April and May of this year. I heard also recently one provider say, we update the patients on a monthly basis. Well, I will tell you that is not going to get your patients on the weekly reports. They will appear once a month on the reports, and emergency managers are using the weekly reports, not a monthly report, to determine what type of resources they need in order to care for the citizens in their county or their parish. And they're making those decisions now about potential storms coming up during the peak of hurricane season. So we want to get this cleared up as quickly as possible. Okay, and we have the lunch and learns that are going on that you can either register for, or you can look at the recordings. Is there anyone on today's call from the Mississippi Department of Health with regards to medical need shelters?
Hey, Jamie, this is Lori Musa. I'm on.
Lori, thank you. I appreciate you being at the conference last week, and welcome today. Lori, do you have any slides that you want to show?
No, I think you covered everything. Now, I'm glad you put the corrected information up there for the planners, even though the first map showed Brad.
Right.
They will be a point of contact, and you can also contact me or Jeremy. Like Jamie said, work through your emergency manager, and they have all the criteria for the medical needs shelter and can help determine if that patient meets the criteria. Now, it is a shelter of last resort, and it may not be open for every storm because it does have to come, from a request from the EOC or from the government.
Is there a general rule of thumb as to what type of patients can be admitted into the medically needed shelter? And that shelter is in Stone County, correct, for the Gulf Coast?
Yes, in Wiggins.
In Wiggins, okay. And is there criteria that is posted that we can refer to, that hospices or home health agencies can look at to see if those patients are going to meet criteria?
I will check and see if we can share that, the EMAs have it, and usually, they go through the ESF8 desk. You have to,
Mhm.
call the EFC because you need that relationship developed. And they do kind of a pre-screening because if they don't meet what's needed for the shelter, for our shelter, then they'll find them someplace else to go, whether it's transportation to the hospital or to a general population shelter. But
Mhm.
they'll coordinate that effort. But
Mhm.
I will definitely ask if we can share that with you for dispersion.
When I pulled the data for the Mississippi Gulf Coast last time, I think we had about 36 patients at that time that were identified as would need assistance to that sort of shelter. How many folks can the shelter accommodate?
It can accommodate 150 patients, and each patient needs to bring a caregiver with them.
It needs to bring a caregiver. So, in other words, it can accommodate up to 300
Yes,
evacuees.
yes.
Wow. And then in terms of sheltering, the staffing there, um, the shelter will remain open until services are restored in that area of the state. Is that a correct understanding?
Well, until it no longer needs to be open. If it's like if it's a Katrina, it would be a totally different story.
Mhm.
So it just depends on the circumstances.
Right. In terms of staffing for that shelter, that's staffed by MSDH.
Yes,
Mhm. And if it remains open after a storm, um, we encourage our the providers to make sure if they have a patient in the shelter that they're continuing, if they're continuing to bill for that patient, CMS has an expectation that they will continue to see the patient wherever the patient is. And if they're in a shelter, can a hospice or a home health staff get into the shelter after the storm to make sure that patients are that their patients there's a continuity of care? Are there protocols for that?
I will have to check on that one, Jamie. I'm not sure, but I will check on that and send you an email.
Okay.
That has to come up because I think the most the shelter's been open has just been, like 2 days.
Mhm.
Um, but I will ask that question and get an answer for you.
I know when we were talking about sheltering in Louisiana, we had folks that were in those medically needed shelters after some of the storms for up to 6 weeks. And so the Department of Health in Louisiana there's an expectation that hospices and home healths will continue to will come to the shelter to take care of their patients because these patients, a lot of these patients require specialized care with regards to either palliative or end of life care. And, you know, most most nurses that are working inside of the departments of health, you know, they don't have that sort of expertise.
Right.
Yeah. So we would need to know if there's a protocol or credentialing that needs to take place for agencies to continue the continuity to have continuity of care for those patients, especially as they are charging CMS
Absolutely.
uh, for
Absolutely.
providing that sort of care.
And like I said, that issue has not come up, but I will get you an answer and we will get that disseminated. Yes.
I appreciate it, and we can certainly disseminate that to all of the Mississippi providers, especially those along the coast. Um, do we have any questions for Lori about sheltering? Do we have any other folks in District 9 or with the state with regards to emergency preparedness that would like to add anything to what has been said, that Lori has said? Well, Lori, I want to thank you for being at the conference again this past last week and being on today's call. I appreciate your help and your support in trying to increase patient safety in an emergency. I want to remind, let's see, let's go to, are there any questions from anyone on today's call? Or anyone have any other announcements that they would like to make? The recording of today's Zoom call will be posted on our website right after today's session closes, and you will be able to revisit this today's session at any time in the future. If there are no other questions or comments, then we will end today's call. I want to remind everyone that next week, next Wednesday, August 7th, 1 p.m., we will be meeting again. And at that time, we will be looking at Louisiana Region number 3. If you have any folks that have not signed up for these calls, they can certainly click on this link and we will get them signed up. In the meantime, I will take all of these PowerPoints, I will convert them into a PDF, and I will be posting them this afternoon in next Wednesday's calendar invite so that people will have this available, today's session available to them in next Wednesday, August 7th's calendar invite. Okay? I want to appreciate everybody being on today's call. And if there are no other questions, we're going to, let's see, okay, Miss Dion Russell, why don't you give me a call or drop me a line so we can look at that as well? Because something happened where the patients for your hospice didn't get updated, and we need to figure that out. So, Miss Russell, Miss Dukes, please drop me a line at jboudreau@lmhpco.org, and we will try and get to the bottom of why those patients didn't update last week. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you for your time today, and we'll see you next Wednesday. Bye, everyone.